Hi, fifth graders. Today we are going to do a short mini lesson on finding a least common multiple. This is an introduction for us to start with chapter 6. But before we start with chapter 6, it is best if we go through our least common multiples that we learned last year in the 4th grade prior to starting to set up equivalent fractions. So you can see from my very first example with our least common multiples that we have an example that says Sam and Mary love to count. Sam counts by 3s and Mary counts by 4s. So notice that when you list Sam's numbers counting by 3s and that you list Mary's numbers when she counts by 4s, Sam and Mary both say the numbers 12 and 24. So we do have the number 12 for Sam and Mary, and then also the number 24 for Sam and Mary. These are what we would call common multiples of 3 and 4. So the first common multiple is 12. So because that is the first common multiple, that is what you would call the least common multiple, or LCM. So just to practice finding multiples, it is best if you have a piece of paper and list these with me, because you may be able to use some of these lists when you go to do your homework tonight. So for all of these examples, we are going to be listing the first 6 multiples of that number. So that means we are going to count by that number for the first 6 numbers. So for number 1, we are going to be counting by 2s. So we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. That is our first 6 numbers when we count by 2s. Next, we're going to count by 5s. So we would start with 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So again, when we're finding multiples, we're just counting by that number. So for our next, as you can see, we're counting by 6s. So when we start with this, we start with 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36. Next, for number 4, we are counting by 7s. So when we count by 7s, we have 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, and 42. Now, for some of these, that it might be a little bit more difficult to count by that number. So, for example, 7. Notice when I have my list of counting by 7s, my first factor, or my first number that I'm putting, my first multiple of 7, that would be 7 times 1. To get 14, it's 7 times 2. To get 21, we have 7 times 3. To get 28, we have 7 times 4. 35 would be 7 times 5. And 42 would be 7 times 6. So you can easily count by those numbers by thinking that number that you're counting by. So for number 4, we were counting by 7s. Multiply that 7 by 1 through 6, and that helps you find your first 6 multiples. Moving on to number 5, counting by 8s. I have 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48. Again, I just kept multiplying 8 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Next, counting by 9s, I would start with 9, 18, 27, 36, 45, and then 54. Next, for number 7, notice I'm going to be counting by 10s. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Counting by 11s, I have 11, 22, 33, 44, 55, and 66. And lastly, I have counting by 12s. So 12, 24, 36, 48, 60, and 72. So again, when you count by that multiple, you are taking that number and you keep multiplying by 1 through however high you would have to go. So now, for numbers 10 through 13, they want us to find the first two common multiples of each pair of numbers. So this, for examples, we can easily use those lists that we just created to find where they're first common. I am going to just recreate those lists instead of having to keep scrolling back and forth, but you can use your list that you just created on your own. So I'm going to list the multiples of 2 and 5, and then I'm just going to circle where they're first common. So counting by 2s, I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. I'm just going to list the first 6, and if I have to continue on, I will. So counting by 5s, I have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So looking at just these lists that I have so far, I notice I do have one set of common multiples, but I only have one set, and remember they want the first two. So my first I see is 10. So 10 is what you would call the least common multiple. However, they did want 2, so that means I do have to extend my counting by 2s out to see how high I would have to count to continue on. So 14, 16, 18, 20. So I can stop counting right there because I see that I now have another set of common multiples, and that would be 20. So like I said, 10 would be what you would call the least common multiple, or the LCM. 20 would be a second multiple that you would have. All right, I am going to erase a little bit so that way I can have room to solve number 11. So for number 11, I have to make sure I count by 4s, and then I'm counting by 8s. So counting by 4s, I have 4, 8, 12, 16, and then we can go up to 20. We'll see if I need to go any further than that. Then counting by 8s, I have 8, 16, 24. And I can already see that I can stop right here because I have two sets of common multiples. So the least common multiple, or the LCM, is 8. And then the next common multiple we see is 16. So those are my two common multiples between 4 and 8. Next, for number 12, counting by 6s and then counting by 8s again. So counting by 6, I have 6, 12, 18, 24, and then 30, and then 36. I'll stop right there. I might have to continue it out. We'll see. For 8, I have 8, 16, 24, 32, and then my next number is 40. So I'm going to have to, I see one set, which would be the least common multiple, but I only have one set so far, so for both of them I'm probably going to have to continue extending. So for the 6, my next, for 7 times 6, that's 42, 48. I'll extend out the 8s. So I stopped with 8 times 5, so now 8 times 6 is 48. Notice sometimes to get a set of common multiples, you just have to multiply the two numbers together, and that gives you a set. So we have our least common multiple, or LCM, is 24. The next common multiple is 48. So now that I have that one solved, I am going to erase a little bit of this so that way I have room for my last one. For question number 13, I'm counting by 4s and also by 12s. So 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. So now I'm going to count by 12s. I have 12, 24. By just listing the first two multiples of 12, I can already see that I can stop because my first set, my LCM, is 12. My second set is 24. So now, to work with the next set of questions, for 14 through 17, this time I just need the least common multiple, or what we like to call the LCM. So for each of these, I am again going to list their multiples, and then I only have to have the first number that they both have in common. So counting by 3s and 8s. So for 3, I have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24. Counting by 8s, I have 8, 16, 24. So I did have to count out for 3s a little bit higher than the 6 that we had from the first how many questions that we did. But for the 8s, I only had to count out to the third number. And then I was able to find my LCM of 24. I am going to erase a little bit of this work, so that way I have room for number 15. So for number 15, counting by 6 and then by 9. So counting by 6s, I have 6, 12, 18. And then I already know by my multiples of 9 that I can stop at 18 for both of them, because that would be my LCM. So the least common multiple is 18. For number 16, counting by 5 and then counting by 8. So when I count by 5s, I do have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. Counting by 8s, I have 8, 16, 24, 32, 40. So just knowing my answers to when I multiply 5 out and multiply 8 out, I did know that I was going to have to go up to 40 to find the LCM. And last, for number 17, I need to make sure that I count by 3s, and then I count by 7s to find my LCM. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21. Counting by 7s, I have 7, 14, 21. I can stop right there because I see that they do have 21 in common. It's the first number that they both have in common. So that would be my LCM. Moving on, I do have a few more examples that I would like to do together, and then I'll show you what you need to do for homework. So for this first, notice I only want the LCM, and this is very similar to what your homework will be like for this lesson. So for number 1, listing my multiples of 6, and again, if you have these written down, you don't need to keep writing them down. You can just look at your list that you have. So counting by 6s, I have 6, 12, 18, 24. Counting by 9s, I have 9, 18, 27. Again, we've already done this question together, so I do know that 18 is the very first number that they both have in common. So 18 would be my LCM. Next, if you want to pause, list your multiples of 12 and 36, and then you can review my list and then review your answer with mine. So counting by 12s, I have 12, 24, 36. I know I can stop there because if I count by 36s, my very first number is 36. If I wanted to, I could show that 36 times 2 is 72, but we all know that we really don't need that number because 36 is the very first number that they both have in common, so 36 is the LCM. Next, multiples of 2 and 3, you can go ahead and list them, and then find your least common multiple to then watch the video to reveal your answer. So multiples of 2, I have 2, 4, 6, 8. Multiples of 3, I have 3, 6, 9. I can stop both my lists right there because I see that they both have 6 as their very first number in common. So that is the number that is their LCM. Moving on to the next one. Notice I have 20 and 4. So I'm going to list multiples of 20, then my multiples of 4, and then I'm going to show the LCM. So 20, 40, and then I'm going to stop right there because I know to go out to 40 I would have to list my first 10 multiples of 4. So I am going to start my 4s. So I have 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, and I can stop because I already have that first set of multiples, and that is 20. And then my last example that we will do together, I have 10 and 5. So I'm going to list my multiples of 10. So 10, 20, 30. My multiples of 5, I have 5, 10, and I can really stop right after 10. I did list the second one, or the third one, I mean. So I do see that they both have 10 in common. So the LCM between 10 and 5 is 10. So for those of you who are working on this homework at home, I would go ahead and write down each of these. I'll show them a little briefly, and then also you can pull up the exact questions on Schoology and then just work from Schoology if you need to. But on your paper, I would number it number 1. Show that you need to list the multiples of 9 and 15, and then you will have to then circle the very first number that they both have in common to have your LCM. Number 2, list your multiples of 4 and 8. Again, circle the very first number that they both have in common to have the LCM between 4 and 8. For number 3, you're going to list the multiples of 18 and 3. Again, circle the first number that they both have in common to have your LCM. For number 4, you have 22 and 6. Find the LCM between those two. For number 5, we have 9 and 21. List the multiples. Circle the very first number that they have in common. For number 6, we have 2 and 3. List your multiples. Again, find the very first number that they both have in common. For number 7, list your multiples of 14 and 4. Circle the very first number that they both have in common to find your LCM. Number 8, list your multiples of 5 and then 25. Find your LCM. Number 9, you're listing your multiples of 7 and then for 6, circle their LCM. And then for number 10, list 12 and 20 and then circle your least common multiple. On Schoology, these are fill-in-the-blank questions, so make sure you are typing the number in correctly. I do want to point out for question number 4, 22 and 6, you will have to list 6 out for most of the multiples that you would know for your basic flashcards for 6 before you'll find your least common multiple between 22. So if you have any questions, please let us know. Again, this is a 4th grade review topic, and this will help us understand how to solve our equivalent fractions. Thanks.